the future, would you try? Come, you will, so will I.
Welcome to Something Came From Baltimore. My name is Tom Gouker, and I'm your host for the evening. Just remember, Something Came From Baltimore is a jazz, blues, and R&B podcast, and it's not normally about Baltimore. And before we get into the show, we have some action items for you. Remember to listen and to like and subscribe. The podcasts, we're found everywhere. Then you flip the podcast to your music friends. We are not in any algorithm, so to speak, so you either have to stumble on us or someone has shared this podcast with you. So pass it forward. We got great artists that you know already, like Joe Lovano, Paula Cole, and Sean Jones, and artists that you need to know, like Adam O'Farrell, Emmanuel Wilkins, and Chelsea Carmichael. Help us find the audience that these artists deserve. Also, to remember to check out dialogbox.com. It's a 30-minute version of the podcast. It's more music. It's more talk. It's Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And they have a great chill music on that station. It's 24 hours, and it's an app. And once you download it, the music and my show will travel with you everywhere. Finally, we have Patreon, and it's in our show notes. Also in the show notes is info on our today's guest. It is Christian Gerald. He's a music historian, author, and he recently published the Cure FAQ. And the feedback from the Cure fans who is reading the book is nothing but stellar. Christian Gerald is a super Prince fan, and he's been a guest on our Graffiti Bridge Summit, the podcast where we geeked and deep dived into that amazing 1989 Prince album and soundtrack called Graffiti Bridge. In this episode, it's a Why Is It Good show, and that's where we ask musicians, and in this case, Christian Gerald, who is a music historian, to pick out an album of their choice, and we ask them, why is it good? Christian Gerald picked out the 1994 Prince recording called Come. See how I did that? As a turbulent time for Prince, his relationship with Warner Brothers being mocked for etching slave on his face, and that ever-changing musical landscape that he is a part of. It is all boiled up in Come, a dark and moody album. It's that time to get into the conversation with Christian Gerald and ask him, why is it good? Yeah, he is a music historian and an author. He has the latest book, The Cure FAQ, All That Is Left to Know About the Most Heartbreakingly Excellent Rock Band the World Has Ever Known. That was released in October 15, 2021. He's swimming in money right now.
That is correct. Absolutely correct.
The reviews are very high, and the Cure heads have agreed that you know your stuff, which is probably the most scariest piece, right?
I appreciate that, and it is scary. It is, but I'm very grateful. People have responded pretty well so far, but we'll see. But yeah, so far so good.
You're a friend of the pod. You're a friend of the show itself, and you've come on many times to help me out to decipher things. I call on you often because you know your stuff.
I appreciate it, and I enjoy it every time.
We have a side series on top of Something Came From Baltimore called Why Is It Good, where we just ask musicians and people who are extremely knowledgeable about music to explain why is an album good. And the album that you picked is Prince's album called Come from 1994.
Yes.
I'm also a fan of this album. This album, you know how like you have albums, okay, I have a great feeling about this album.
Yeah.
And when I pack it away with all the other Prince stuff, I'm like, okay, comes an album that I like, but I haven't listened to in a while. There's so many things that I remember about it. I just remember it not being promoted by either Warner Brothers or by Prince.
That's correct.
It was a super, super dark album with a death to Prince thing on it. I think I bought the cutout of the CD because the album just didn't sell.
It's a shame it didn't, but yeah, they didn't promote it. So
it was a weird time for him. Like I'm thinking about, there's things I'm hearing on this album that I don't hear on other albums before or even afterwards.
I mean, that was a difficult time for him. That was right in the midst of his bitter battle with Warner Brothers over his contract. He was writing Slave on his face. He was struggling commercially. I mean, struggling. He wasn't getting the hits like he had in the past. So, the stakes were really high for him. And the ironic thing is he had just scored a huge hit with The Most Beautiful Girl in the World. It was this, surprise single that Warner Brothers let him put out on a subsidiary label with under the symbol name, sort of as a gambit, trying to sort of break his contract. His thinking was, well, that's not a Prince record, that's a symbol record, right? And, the legal guys didn't really see it that way, so it didn't really pan out. So Come was part of a settlement with Warner Brothers to sort of fill out his contract. And so what he did was put together a collection of songs. He basically said, well, this is just sort of a mixtape, and he did the same thing with Chaos and Disorder a couple years later. But Come was actually, it's a very coherent record. They were all recorded right around the same time, about the same time as the Gold Experience material, which it's all really top-notch material. And it's a great record. It's very dark. It's very coherent, consistent, and, it wasn't particularly commercial, but, he wasn't trying for top 40 hits. I think it stands up strongly considering the circumstances under which it was released. It really stands up as a really strong record.
I agree too. It's so weird because now I had bought this out when it came out, so I lived that time period. And now looking back on it, trying to decode what happened, Batman came out in '89. Graffiti Bridge came out in '90. Diamond and Pearls was a big hit. That was '91. The Love Symbol album came out in '92. And then the greatest hits, the hits and B-side came out in '93, and then Come came out, and then in August, and then in November, the Black Album came out.
And that was a limited edition. That was also part of the settlement with Warner Brothers to sort of free him from his contract.
Yeah, I look at the Hits album as a death stamp of his career, of where, this is kind of the end point of him as a dominating pop hit star. Now he's going to be searching for sounds and ideas a little more than he was before. Plus, we have the Jehovah Witnesses that are coming up soon. That is going to take him and where he, his language, the way he thinks about things are going to change also.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, absolutely correct. That hits collection, disc 1, disc 2, and then the B-sides, that represents his peak era, with Warner Brothers. And then after that, it's sort of you diving off the deep end into the unknown. And he got the freedom he wanted. So so compare what happens, with Warner Brothers and, with him on his own in terms of quality and consistency of the material. I don't think there's any question that the Warner Brothers material is superior. But, that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of great records that came after that. And Come is certainly one of them. And it's been largely forgotten. It sort of disappeared without a trace upon release. Only diehards really know about it, which is a shame. It needs to have a wider audience, and I assume at some point the Prince, the estate will reissue it like they have been doing with other records, and hopefully it'll get a reassessment because it's fresh sounding. It is a little bit dated, the '90s style production, but the material is very strong throughout, and there's some really edgy stuff on it.
Weren't you under the impression this was a full album about like either masturbation or coming? Like,
no,
because I thought that's how it was sold to people. It was like whole album about cum.
I don't think so. I mean, that's not the impression I had. I've never really viewed it in that way. I mean, the album to me, the title is more sort of it's a double entendre, of course, but come as in come hither. He's sort of. It's the first track. I think that it is obviously sexual, but it has sort of a little bit. I don't think it necessarily has to do with masturbation per se. Although I think that there's probably. I mean, that track in particular obviously deals with that a little bit, and that sort of long extended portion, which I think is actually too long. That's sort of one of the flaws on the album, in my opinion. But
sure,
he had recorded multiple different versions of that song. There were multiple different configurations of the lineup of an album to be called Come, and that's sort of what it ended up. And I don't think that all the songs are sexual or overtly sexual. Some of them are, but not all of them.
I said you're going right into this album.
I'm sorry. I think it's I think it's it's
we'll
one of those records. I've probably listened to this album more since it came out than a lot of the classic '80s records.
Yeah, I know why. Like I can tell why. We're gonna get into the track, and I can tell you what turns you on about some of these songs. That it seems it seems different than Prince. Like what I'm hearing on this album is different from what I ever heard before or after. Like it looks like he changed gears. There's some kind of like, okay, drum programming. That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, the drum programming is different and kind of current or different than what he did. And then there's layers of synth, like deep layers of synth that you love. That's all through this album. And it's kind of like a point where, like I'd say, oh, it's like Depeche Mode, where they're really focused on like underneath the surface, like layers and layers of synth doing things. And that's what
exactly right.
And then the background vocals are like swirling in some ways, where they're not just like multi-layered tracks. Like he has it worked out where it's almost cathedral sounding, and they're swooshing through, which is something different than I normally hear from Prince.
Come. Lie down beneath my shadow. Lie down beneath my shadow with great delight, and your fur will be sweet to me. Come. My left hand under your head, while my right embraces time. Therein my virgin loves wine.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right. I mean, the synthesizers. I mean, he's always used synths. You know, going back to 1999. So, you know, certainly controversy, of course, but it sounds different on this record. The intricacy of the layering on Space, in particular, that track. That track is one of his best in my opinion, of the 90s, because of the synth arrangements and also the vocal arrangements, which were absolutely beautiful. You know, breathtaking harmonies, and that song just flows so smooth out of the speakers, and it still sounds great today.
It does, and it sounds like nothing like I've heard before, and it just goes right into the drum programming that I've never heard before from him, and it actually can be lifted off and going into an alternative rock format of that time period, and it would have worked, you know.
Oh, totally, and it's a shame because it was actually a single. You know, they did release. You know, they did a little bit of promotion work for this record. They put out two singles, and Space was the second one, and it didn't really do much. It didn't have much of a chance, and it's a shame because it would fit nicely on those greatest hits records if there was any justice. You know, if it had been given a chance, if it had been released, say, a few years later when Prince was sort of more commercially viable, I think it could have been, you know, a substantial hit. But, you know, as it was, by that time, his momentum had cooled. You know, the Warner Brothers feud had really damaged him, and people were joking about him because of the symbol. And he wasn't just cool anymore, you know, for a lot of people. You know, he always has diehard fans, which is what, you know, Let It Go was about. But, you know, Space, it's sort of been under the radar all these years. But diehard fans know it, and it's definitely a great song.
Yeah, I agree. Just to get this on the interview, like the reviews on this album were mixed to poor. All Music Guide gave it a 2 out of 5. Rolling Stone gave it a 2 out of 5.
Right.
The album is 48 minutes and 43 seconds. It was released August 16, 1994. It went gold, and it hit number 15 on our charts.
Yeah.
In UK, it went to number 1. Let It Go, the single, hit number 31 on the pop charts and number 10 on the R&B charts.
Mm-hmm.
And Space only went to 71 on the R&B charts.
Yeah, that's a shame.
the album Come itself in UK did a little better. Like it was received a lot more, and it sold a couple more. Well, the equivalent of what that is of selling records.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised because he was, Love Sexy was the #1 album in the UK. So that he was doing really well with there at the time, and Let It Go. I think Let It Go actually sounds a little bit more contemporary in terms of. I think that was a late added track because it talks a little bit about his standing in the music industry and his standing with fans, and a little bit about the record company battle. And it was a pretty good first single, but it just never had the sort of commercial, mass commercial appeal that most of his big hits. I mean, imagine compare it to other first singles from Prince albums. In other words, like Kiss or say When Doves Cry. It's just not on the same level, So the thing with an album like Come is that it's solid. It's really good throughout, but the highs are not on par with his best highs. And I think that's the difference between it and, say, some of his classic 80s records when you take a look at it in terms of overall quality.
There's a couple things before we'll go through track by track. I'm almost ready.
Okay,
but there's just a couple. Yeah, that's okay. Well, that's the beauty of editing.
Yeah, I know.
the thing about him, and I wonder what your opinion is, because I wonder if he could just had that one person to edit his material, kind of give him the skinny on stuff, because the reason that he wanted to flood the market with his back catalog, and Warner Brothers was pushing back. But when you get to Crystal Ball and you get to Emancipation, that could have came out 2 amazing single albums instead of 3 albums apiece. Along with, in this album, like, I'd say that some things need to be cut off of it or changed, or the beauty of Prince is that it's you're staring inside his mind. You get to look inside. So there is no no true collaboration other than what his mind is. But for editing purposes, for sales and stuff, it would have been nice. But the thing is that stuff was expensive. When you want to get Emancipation, Crystal Ball, the double at live, or the double hits album, Graffiti Bridge was a double album, Sign of the Times was a double album. You're spending a lot of money being a Prince fan. That's
true, but most Prince fans would have been happy to spend even more because they all knew that the vault was loaded with material. And I can only speak for myself, because even with all of the volume that was released, I kept thinking what we don't have, which is kind of selfish, really. But
what did you think of all the tracks from 1999, the extra stuff?
I gotta be honest with you, I was underwhelmed with it. I was a little disappointed. I thought, okay, this is not really living up to the hype of the vault and what we've all heard and sort of fed ourselves about it for 30 plus years. I didn't think it was all that revelatory. That being said, it's all good, strong, top-notch, great. I was excited to listen to, but I came across, for me, I sort of felt that he chose the right songs for the record. There wasn't anything on that extended collection that I thought, oh my gosh, that should have been on the record instead of, so and so. So to me, it was a little underwhelming. What did you think about it?
Oh, the same thing, and that's where I'm getting at. Is I'm like, maybe the vault isn't as hot as we think.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's what I've been thinking.
Because things are warmed over, like. When you're on a groove and everyone's it's clicking, that's what's going to hit vinyl, as opposed to the vault. There's a reason why it's in the vault. That's what I'm thinking. There's a reason.
And he hyped it up, he was he did his share of hyping up the vault, and I think that it doesn't quite live up to it based on what we've heard so far. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, it seems like when they're putting stuff out, it seems very random and not organized. And that's okay. I guess it's okay. I think maybe the David Bowie's estate made more sense.
Yeah.
Or even Paul McCartney's stuff is coming out, or Dylan's coming out, or Neil Young. You can kind of figure out where the releases are coming, but they're releasing stuff all over the place. New, old, young, whatever. It's all over.
Yeah, it is sort of haphazard, but I don't mind that so much. I think that it's sort of they couldn't really start from the beginning and go from like For You and Prince, and you just had to sort of pick and choose your spots with the big releases. I assume that Purple Rain will be probably 2024 for the anniversary, a bigger edition than the one that was released, already. But, I think that I'm okay with the order, but I gotta say, and I think that the quality, that they've been very painstaking. The sound quality is good, and the material, they presented what he had. I just think that what he had is sort of left us a little wanting so far in terms of what we've all perceived as what the vault would be. It's just not quite there yet. Now, maybe Parade, the Dream Factory stuff, I assume will be on that reissue. That's going to be a wealth of material, I would think, a lot of good stuff. And who knows? There may be things that they haven't even discovered yet. Who knows? I don't know what the status is of all the research, but I think that they're doing a pretty good job with it as far as the estate goes in terms of the releases and their strategy. I just think that the quality of the material is, you're right. Things are in the vault for a reason, by and large, and that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm thinking. The other part, what I love to do is have every single tour,
that would be awesome.
Cleaned up and beautified, and have like.
Well, yeah. Have you heard they're putting out the Prince and Revolution Live? That Syracuse show. They've redone it and remastered. It sounds amazing. They put out "Let's Go Crazy" on Spotify as like a teaser track, and that's coming out as a deluxe vinyl, DVD in I think in July, if I'm not mistaken. But it sounds really, really, really good. I would love for them to do that, for every tour, and I'm sure that they'll have some sort of thing, some sort of archival project like the Grateful Dead, sort of an ongoing live series of some sort,
Yeah, and it's like I go on YouTube all the time when I feel like I don't know what to watch. I'll put on a Prince in concert. The Love Sexy tour is amazing, and it was a bomb. It's like it was unsuccessful financially, and it's brilliant. It's a brilliant piece of imagery, and also the music was just incredible.
Oh, yeah. Totally. I still think that was his strongest tour of all, in my opinion, in terms of musicianship, set list, and just the overall vibe of it. I really, really love that tour, and I wish I had seen it in person. But yeah, that hopefully will be subject to a deluxe. I mean, it has to be. They have to put out something on that.
You're listening to Something Came from Baltimore. It's a jazz, blues, and R&B podcast and show, and you're listening to Why Is It Good? And in this episode, we are asking musical historian Christian Gerald which album he would like to discuss, and obviously he picked the Prince 1994 forgotten gem called Come. Now, let's get back to the action. Let's do this album. It's called Come.
Yeah.
And I see, now that I'm sitting here listening to it to dissect it, there's an overall theme throughout this that I wasn't even conscious of, which is that the ocean sound,
right, yes.
Then the whispering of some sort, and then we go right into the song, right. And it connects the tracks together.
Come. Lie down beneath my shadow. Lie down beneath my shadow with great delight, and your fruit will be sweet to me. Come. My left hand under your head, while my right embraces time. Therein my virgin loves wine.
Also, the orgasm song has, sometimes you have storms going through the songs, you have another ocean throughout the whole thing. So I'd say out of the tracks, the 10 tracks, I think 6 of them at least start with the ocean kind of sound going on with the little whispering. So with Come, the first song is over 11 minutes long. And I closed my eyes and I said, when did I have enough of this song? When do I want it to fade out? And it was right around, and I was consistent. It was around 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, that obviously is where I would chop this thing off at. the drum track that is on this is something that I've never heard him do before, but I love it.
If you're 18 and over, come here. I got something for your mind.
And it's contemporary of the time, but it doesn't seem like he hung on to that. Like I don't remember hearing that a lot or anything from him like that.
It was very smooth. I liked it. You know, I love the drum track. It was way too long. Even on bootlegs, there's probably 5 or 6 different versions of that song, and none of them are that long, and they all have sort of different vibes to them. Some of them are a little bit edgier, more sort of hard edged. That one was very soft, and you know, the one that he ended up releasing is very soft and silky and kind of, but it's beautiful. But he lets it drag on for far too long, and some of it just gets very silly. Now, I like the very ending of it. I think it's got a nice sort of fanfare ending to it.
I'm gonna drive you crazy.
You should do that,
But he could have, I think, chopped it down to probably 6 or 7 minutes would have been much more effective, than what he ended up releasing.
Bizarre that they would allow that as the first song on the album. Like,
yeah, well, I mean,
like Warner Brothers was fed up with him. They're like, whatever, 11 minutes, bang, put it on there.
I mean, he was not giving them what they wanted to begin with, because when he turned in that record, you know, keep in mind the Gold Experience came out the following year, and it had material from the same sort of time period. Warner Brothers came to him and said, you know, they rejected it at first, and they wanted some of the stronger material that was on the Gold Experience, like, you know, like Endorphin Machine and the song that Tevin Campbell did. So they weren't happy with it, and he refused to change it. You know, the parts that you were talking about, the intro, that was actually in the Ocean Sounds, and the vocals, the spoken word parts, that was actually originally one track called Poem, and he spliced it up eventually at the end of the day to do those little intro parts. But originally it was one long track that included that, and then the orgasm sort of shrieking that ends the record. That was all one track.
Wow,
so that was
that's interesting.
That was sort of I actually think it's more effective the way he did it on the record than having it on one track. But you know, I think it works well. But yeah, Warner Brothers was not happy with it, but Prince was in no mood to give them anything, and so it came out as it was.
Yeah, wasn't he also trying to have it go out with the Gold Experience also? Like, it's like that goes side by side.
That's what he wanted. But Warner Brothers refused smartly. Gold Experience was a stronger record. It ended up coming out the following year, and it did much better. It was a top 10 record, and it's widely considered by fans as his pinnacle of the 90s. And I agree with that. The Gold Experience hand in hand. You know, they're very different records, you know, but they sort of go hand in hand because they were all recorded basically at the same time.
Yeah. When I think of Come, I was like, this is, you know, like the R&B Quiet Storm.
It's a late night album. It's a late night underground album. It's got a lot of personality to it. And, you know, most artists, like, this is, by Prince's standards, this is a throwaway record, right? But most artists would kill to have a record this good, you know?
Yeah. All right. So we'll get into space. We started to talk about it. It's not like any drum track I ever heard from Prince, you know, up to that point. The fact that he used the countdown, the NASA spaceship countdown thing is something that is typically not something he would do. And I would think that instead of like using something like that, he would do it himself, maybe.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about that, but yeah, you're right. I don't know. Is that an actual sample from NASA or?
It has to be. It has to be more professional. It's definitely not done in the studio. This is where I'm like, this is why you love it so much. It has way deep in the mix is all this a synth layer that's really Depeche Mode-ian.
It's pillowy, and the vocals kind of weave in with the synth. It's all one sort of ocean of sound, and it's magical. It's one of his. He was at his best as a producer and in the studio. Nobody can match him. And this is one of those examples. It's sort of under the radar, but it shows right there how magical genius he could be in the studio. And I think it sounds amazing still.
What do you think of the line, everything I want to do to your body, I will do to your hand? What is that?
I can only scratch my head. Some of the lyrics, Prince could be a brilliant lyricist, but he could throw out some clunkers, and that song's got a couple of them in there, honestly.
I read all the lyrics before we came on it, and I was like, okay. That's where I'm like, what maybe that helper, that doesn't exist, could have helped a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not. That's one of those lyrics when I'm singing along in the car that I have to sort of like, okay, I guess cringe at that one. But yeah, Prince, he doesn't. He can sing what he wants,
Oh no, the song's awesome. Come is a great song, just too long. Space, awesome. The next song, Pheromone, is it starts out with that ocean and the whispering thing. There's a little S&M vibe going through the song with the lyrics. It has a great drum and synth again, and he keeps on saying like pheromone, like really deep in the mix. It's like a electronic thing, very, very low, and it's very cool.
It doesn't sound like anything Prince ever did before or after. It's a very unique song. It's edgy, very dark. It's definitely an S&M vibe. It's sort of this sort of violent undertones, violent sexual sort of psychological thriller drama kind of thing. It's a really great song. It's exciting. The rhythm of it is intense. He nails that one, and it's really sort of a different idiom than he's ever really put out before. And I don't know where it came from, but it fits this record because of the overall darkness of the record. And, I just think it's another one of those sort of hidden gems that a lot of, diehard fans know about it, but hopefully more casual fans will discover it.
It goes right into Loose, which it sounds like it could be right off the Batman soundtrack with a.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. But then there's like a guitar solo that is very industrial, very Nine Inch Nails sounding. and the song, the word loose is said over and over, and that's where he has it. Instead of multi-tracking the loose, it's multi-track, but it's also in a electronic loop where it just like it just keeps on going, and it's not a chant, it's more of electronic thing of loose as a note or a sound.
Yeah, it's almost like he probably fed it into like a synthesizer or something. And it kind of reminds me of 10cc, I'm Not in Love, with all those sort of vocal parts coming through.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of, But I love that song too. It's sort of an audacious vocal on his part, and it's sort of it jumps right out of the speakers, the synth lines, and then those kind of crazy guitar lines, and it's really a cool song.
It's great. 1, 2, 3, 4 reminds me of something that you'd hear maybe during controversy time period, that count off, and you're not really sure what you're going to get on the song, at the beginning, and then it takes off, and you're like, wow, this is something that could have went right after a 9, like had like a whole kind of thing, like the next track. If you're doing a mix,
I'm sure he had to have been influenced by 9 Inch Nails on this. I had to have been.
Definitely.
Hey, whoop it up, yeah.
The next song is a clunker for me. I don't know about you. We got the storm, we got the intro, the spoken word intro, and the smack papa.
I mean, it's an interesting one. It was originally, I want to say, like, he was going to put out an EP at one point called, I think it was Peach was going to be on it, because that ended up on the Greatest Hits collection, because that was a song from the same time period. It was Peach, Papa, and a song called Pope, which was another one that was on the Greatest Hits collection, also from this period. And I can't remember what the fourth one was, maybe Strays of the World or something like that. But Papa was around, for a little bit, and ended up on this record. I don't think it necessarily fits on this record. I mean, I guess it does because it's sort of a curio on an album of curios. But I'm with you. It's not my favorite. It's definitely not my favorite. I don't mind it so much, but I do think the smack thing, it doesn't quite work. But I like the ending. I really like.
Yeah. The last 20 seconds are amazing.
Yeah. Totally.
And I was listening to it going like, okay, I like when it picks up a little, and then I was like, oh, it's only 20 seconds of that song, and I was like, in my mind, I thought it was a lot longer.
And it's a short one, so, which it sounds like something. I think it would have fit better maybe on Chaos and Disorder. It kind of fits the vibe of that album a little better.
Okay, so number 6 on this album is Race, is in my top 5 of best songs of all time because of how hardcore funky this song is.
That's high praise, and it is a great song.
I love the cut me, cut you, both the blood is red.
Race in the space, I'm not human. Race, bass the music, we all bones when we dig it. Race in the space, I'm not human. Cut me, cut you, both the blood is red. I got ya. Race. Check it. 3 seats over, there's a lady black. Entrusted to a care is a little white girl. And the fact of the matter is,
we're all bones when we're dead. There's great lines in this song. The sample of Face the Music is awesome. But to me, this is like right up there with Housequake as something that can make you like get up and dance. And I'll play this for people, and people are like, "Who's this?" It's that it's that shocker that maybe this should have been the single because it's
You
really
know,
hot.
that's a good point. It's interesting to think what might have been had that been the single, and I don't know because it's a little bit, some of the it's not quite in line with a lot of sort of, the conceptual sort of ideas about race. It's a little bit different. He has some interesting ideas there. And I don't know how it would have gone over had it been sort of the lead single and, exposed to a wider audience. It could have been controversial. But, he never shied away from controversy, that's for sure, but or stating his opinion. And I think you're right. It's a great song. It's very funky. I love the samples. He also raps probably better in this track than probably any other ones that he has done. And maybe Get Off would be the exception. But it's a really solid song in that sort of hip hop vibe that he does, and with mixed results in the *90s. But yeah, I'm with you. I think it's great.
Now, Dark is the 7th song on this album, and
Yeah.
in my mind, I see a contemporary blues artist like taking this on, and and kind of reworking it a little because it's the blues song on this album.
It is. It is totally
Great layered backing vocals. I want to curse you, baby, because you let me in the dark. How cool is that?
Lost in the shadow of pain. Like an innocent man that's on death row. I don't understand what made you go. You wanna leave me, baby. Leave me here in the dark. Can you tell me?
it's moody. He delivers a killer vocal on this one, and I love the horn arrangement. I think it's a very tight song. My thought is that I think that it was probably, had there been a third single, Dark would have been the one, because there was a remix commission for it, which ended up on the Crystal Ball collection under the name So Dark. It was basically a sort of, radio edit kind of thing with a more trip hop kind of beat to it, which I didn't really care for. I like the album version a lot better. But yeah, it's one of his sort of most, I think it's one of his better ballads, certainly of the '90s, and it really stands up there with some of his greats. The vocal's great, the sense of it is great. It sounds heartbroken, and I think it's a great song.
Yeah, it's great. It's great so far. Other than Papa, so far we're digging like every single track.
Absolutely.
And here's another standout: the solo.
Gosh, yeah, that one.
Yeah, I said this is excellent with no explanation whatsoever. It's going to be hard to hear my voice if I ever learn one more to speak. I'm so lost, no one can find me.
So low, the curve looks like a skyscraper. So the stars are under me. So quiet, I can hear the blood rushing through my veins. So low, I feel like I'm gone insane. The angels, they watch in wonder when you made love to me. Through the rain and the thunder, you cried next to see. You were so kind, I felt sorry. lucky. No one was lucky. No one was lucky. Yes, me. And now you go, and I just wanna be still. So silent, I just let my senses sleep. It's gonna be so hard to hear my voice if I ever learn once more to speak. I'm so lost, no one can find me. I've been looking for so long, but now I'm done. I'm so low, so low. My name is no one.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's a cathedral style vocal, very electronica, and
Yeah.
it's something that is, oh wow, it's just kind of sets, it's apart from everything else.
It is. It's another track on this record that doesn't sound like anything else he ever did, and the vocal on it is absolutely spine tingling. It's spine tingling. It's and it's also a little bit deeper, personally, emotionally than what we normally get from Prince. Prince sort of keep a reserve a lot of times. You don't really get deep in there. It's sort of a lot of the things you don't know if it's about him or if it's about a character or somebody else or whatever. But this one just seems really personal and almost confessional in a way that a lot of his material doesn't sort of hit upon. And it's placed late on the record. It's it's an interesting track. It's very sort of out there. It's not something that they were ever going to play on the radio, and it was daring and experimental. It was really something different, and I'm glad he included it.
Yeah, that's funny. I was looking at the lyrics. I said it feels extremely personal. Yeah, and it's just the production value is just is intense. So we just hit so many great things going on, and then we get to Let It Go, and that's
Mhm.
where I was like, oh, I don't really like this song. Like,
Ready or not, here I come.
Yeah,
like
it feels like a tacked on addendum, doesn't it?
what we've been through on this album, this journey, to have this song come on, it's a mid-tempo,
Yeah.
R&B single, and
I feel
it's
like the Prince, even though he wasn't really promoting the record, and I feel like he sort of dove in there and was like, okay, we need a single here. We need something to show some, because even though it was sort of an afterthought collection of extra songs to fulfill his contract, he still has pride in what he's putting out, and he wanted, I think he still wanted to just be successful. Otherwise, why bother? And this song, I think, sounds a little bit more, like it was sort of more contrived, honestly, than anything else on the record.
yeah,
But I still like it. I still think it's a good song. I like it. I just have a problem with it sort of tacked on at the end, kind of, And this first single, I just don't think it worked. I think the album would have been better served. He had tons of material. He certainly didn't have a shortage of material from this time period. And to serve up a record, what was it, 48 minutes? And then with this song, I think it could have been even better. But I do think it still stands up as a really, really strong, underrated record.
So when you hear it, when you hear it, you're like, oh, okay. It's like,
yeah,
it's a shame.
You're right. It was underwhelming. I remember when it came out as a single, and it was solo was actually the B side, and I thought, oh my God, this is much more interesting than the A side. But I also thought, well, where's the non-album B side? He skimped on the material, even on the B sides. He wasn't doing that anymore. He didn't want to hand over more material to Warner Brothers than he had to. But you're right. It's just not quite there. Even as a first single, certainly, and even on this album, it's not quite there with the rest of the record.
No. And then the last song is Orgasm, which is, maybe if I was younger, I think it would be a little more sexier. But as a whole, I'm ready to. It's a very skippable moment.
Yeah,
there's really nothing going on.
Totally. It's sort of, it's unfortunate, to be honest with you. It's sort of is a blot on the record, in my opinion. It didn't need to be there. I don't think it adds anything. I think it's juvenile and trite, and it brings it down a level, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the album's over. They're okay, now at least I know the album's over. So what we got really is, we have 3 tracks that are just kind of the Papa, the Let It Go, and Orgasm, and we think the rest of the songs are like a notch above normal, where they're pretty awesome. Like some of that stuff is pretty awesome on this album.
I completely agree. Yeah, it's really top notch. It's really top notch in terms of most of the record is, I would say, flies above, except for the Gold Experience. Most of the stuff that he put out in the '90s, I think it's up there, in terms of quality. Those 6 songs probably are as good as anything he's done that whole decade, and some of it rivaled his earlier material. But like I said, I don't think the highs quite match the highs of his best era. But he's still Prince, and he's still got amazing highs.
The music is contemporary, but it's experimental because he's doing things that I haven't heard before, and we haven't heard him afterwards, and it's cool. You're like, oh, this is an experimental album. It's not really hit worthy. There's no gun for a hit on this album.
Oh yeah, he's on Diamonds and Pearls, for instance, he was definitely trying to have hits. It was intentionally commercial. And this one was obviously not. He had tons of material, like I said, mentioned before, because keep in mind, the Gold Experience, some of the material from this era ended up on Chaos and Disorder. There was the NPG album Exodus, which also came from this era. He had tons of material, much more commercial songs. So this was kind of a dark, sort of underground, vibey album. And I kind of am glad that he went that approach, because otherwise, it would just be more of a hodgepodge, I think, something that we would have, less interesting. I think that the way he put this together made it sort of more interesting than it had a right to be, given its status as sort of a contract filler.
Sure. And I do believe that he was listening to other things out there. the Depeche Mode to Nine Inch Nails combo, even Enya with the solo, the way to layer vocals in a different way instead of just double tracking.
Really, it was creative. It was sort of like I said, edgy. It was sort of audacious, in places. It was one of those records where it's part of what makes Prince. He's more than just the big top 40 hits.
All right, so we're at a point where we end this conversation with why is it good? In your opinion, if you could tell people, like, I don't know if you're beating a dead horse at this point because of some of your points, but if you could tell the audience, like, why is this album good?
Come is a good record, and first and foremost because it's Prince. almost without exception, whenever he put out a record, it's worthy of at least listening and exploring and discovering. But this album in particular, it came out in a period when he was not, viewed very favorably by a lot of people in the press and even fans, and they couldn't wait to denigrate this record when it came out. There was a lot of negative reviews because of he just had lost sort of the coolness factor. But he turns out, instead of just contract fillers, standard stuff, it's a really interesting album. It's very dark and vibey. It's got some really great material on it, and it's one of those records that diehard fans will know, and casual fans who may not have heard it need to discover it and say, "Oh, yeah, this is really cool. I can't believe we missed this." It's been out for almost 30 years, and it stands the test of time. It sounds great. It's one of those Prince records that I think will be more appreciated as time goes on.
Well, I want to make sure that I say this. Thank you very much for joining me today on Something Came from Baltimore as the Why Is It Good edition.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's no wonder there's a puddle there, holding it in for so long. You can let it go. It won't be wrong. It's just you and me, baby. Tonight and forevermore. You should do that, baby. Fuck it. On the floor. Or better yet, why don't you do it on the chair? You should get that shit started. You can change your underwear.
If you're a musician and you want to chat about an album and tell me why is it good, email me at somethingcamefrombaltimore@gmail.com. Let me know the album that you're into, and if it's kind of close to our format, we'll give it a shot. Thank you, Christian Gerald, for joining me today on Something Came from Baltimore. Your information is in our show notes. The show is over. Everyone have a great day today.
Something came from Baltimore. Something came from Baltimore. Something came from Baltimore.